In the exclusive enclave of Westview Heights, where polished exotic cars line cobblestone driveways and million-dollar views of the Pacific Ocean come standard with every home, a 9-year-old girl named Sophia Martinez is about to transform a moment of wealthy condescension into something that will shock some of the most privileged car enthusiasts in California. When 43-year-old hedge fund manager Blake Harrington and his circle of affluent friends decide to mock the groundskeeper's daughter by challenging her to diagnose a malfunctioning Ferrari 488 Spider at the annual Westview Concours, they expect to create social media content ridiculing her family's modest circumstances. Nobody expects what happens next. What Blake intended as an afternoon's cruel entertainment will expose not only his callous character, but reveal a young mind so extraordinary that when Sophia speaks just 3 words, variable valve timing, the Ferrari's owner, legendary car collector Victor Montgomery, will freeze in complete disbelief. Realizing this child understands Italian automotive engineering better than mechanics, he pays $300 an hour. The California sun blazed hot on the meticulously landscaped grounds of the Westview Country Club, where the annual Concours was in full swing. Rows of automotive perfection stretched across the emerald lawn, vintage Aston Martins, gleaming Lamborghinis, and rare Bugattis, worth more than most people's lifetime earnings. The air carried the mingled scents of expensive cologne, champagne, and the subtle aroma of hand-stitched leather upholstery. Among the pristine vehicles, a 2018 Ferrari 488 Spider in Rosso Cosa red stood with its hood raised, surrounded by 4 men in designer casual wear, their expressions showing the particular frustration of the NID when confronted with problems their money couldn't immediately solve. Victor Montgomery, the Ferrari's owner and CEO of Montgomery Technologies, paced beside his prized possession while on a heated phone call with his usual exotic car mechanic. "I don't care if it's Saturday, Paolo. This event only happens once a year, and I've got the judges coming by in less than an hour." Victor snapped into his phone, his normally composed demeanor cracking. The engine was running perfectly yesterday, and now it's idling rough and threatening to stall every time I touch the gas pedal. He listened for a moment, his frown deepening. 2 hours. That's unacceptable. This is why I pay you triple your normal rate. Blake Harrington sipped his champagne, watching his friend's frustration with thinly disguised amusement. At 40, Blake had built his reputation in both finance and Westview social circles through a combination of business acumen and carefully calculated cruelty that passed as wit among certain crowds. His cashmere sweater, designer sunglasses, and the platinum Rolex on his wrist spoke of wealth worn as naturally as his perfect white teeth. "Victor, this is what happens when you buy Italian instead of German," Blake commented, gesturing to his own pristine Porsche 911 GT3 parked nearby. All passion and no practicality. Beside them, Trevor Wellington and Mark Davies nodded in agreement, completing the quartet of wealth and privilege that served as the unofficial ruling class of Westview Heights. Trevor, an entertainment lawyer to A-list celebrities, checked his watch with impatience, while Mark, who had made his fortune in commercial real estate, surveyed the growing crowd of spectators being held back by velvet ropes. "The judges start their rounds in 45 minutes, Mark noted. "If you can't get it running properly by then, you might as well withdraw from the competition." Victor ended his call with a frustrated gesture. "Paolo can't get here for at least 2 hours. Says he's in the middle of another job in Loyola." As the men contemplated their limited options, a middle-aged man in khaki work clothes approached, carefully navigating between the expensive vehicles. Eduardo Martinez had worked as head groundskeeper at Westview Country Club for nearly 15 years, his skilled hands responsible for the impeccable landscaping that served as the backdrop for the members' luxurious lifestyles. His face weathered by years of outdoor work. Eduardo carried himself with the quiet dignity of someone who took pride in his labor, despite the member's tendency to look through, rather than at him. "Excuse me, Mr. Montgomery," Eduardo said respectfully. "I couldn't help overhearing about your Ferrari. If you'd like, I can take a look at it. I used to work as a mechanic before I became a groundskeeper." The four men turned toward Eduardo with expressions ranging from surprise to thinly veiled disdain. Blake's eyebrows rose above his designer sunglasses. "You work on Ferraris, Martinez?" Blake asked, his tone making it clear he found the idea ridiculous. "These aren't exactly Toyota." Eduardo maintained his professional composure, though his eyes reflected a momentary flash of indignation. "I worked at Gonzalez Auto for 12 years before coming here. We handled many high-performance vehicles." Victor, desperate enough to consider any option, nodded reluctantly. "I suppose it couldn't hurt to take a look. The mechanic can't get here for hours." As Eduardo stepped toward the Ferrari, a small figure emerged from behind a nearby hedge. Sophia Martinez, Eduardo's daughter, had been helping her father with some light gardening tasks on the periphery of the event. Small for her age, with dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, and intelligent eyes that missed nothing, Sophia moved with the natural confidence of a child who hadn't yet learned to doubt herself. Her clothes were simple but clean. Jeans, sneakers, and a blue t-shirt with a Science Museum logo across the front. "Papa," Sophia called softly in Spanish, "¿Necesitas ayuda?" "Do you need help?" Eduardo turned with a gentle smile. "No, Mia. This is complicated adult work. Stay back, please." Blake noticed the girl and nudged Trevor, a smirk playing at the corners of his mouth. Something in his expression shifted, the particular gleam that appeared when he spotted an opportunity for the kind of entertainment he enjoyed most, the kind at someone else's expense. "Wait," Blake said, loud enough for the gathering crowd to hear. "I have a better idea." He pulled out his phone, activating the camera with a casual swipe. "Let's let the groundskeeper's kid look at it. Might make for some interesting social media content." Eduardo stiffened, immediately recognizing the cruel intention behind Blake's suggestion. "Mr. Harrington, my daughter is only 9. That's precisely what makes it entertaining," Blake cut in smoothly. A 9-year-old versus a $250,000 supercar, he turned to the growing audience of wealthy spectators. "Wouldn't everyone love to see what happens when we let a child diagnose Victor's Ferrari problem?" Several spectators laughed, while others pulled out their own phones, sensing the potential for shareable content. Eduardo stepped protectively toward his daughter, but Victor, stressed about his malfunctioning vehicle and the approaching judges, failed to recognize the cruelty underlying Blake's suggestion. "Look, at this point, I'd take advice from anyone," Victor said with exasperation. "The judging starts soon, and I need solutions, not problems." Blake approached Sophia with an exaggerated courtesy that barely masked his condescending intent. "What do you say, little girl? Think you can fix a Ferrari? It's one of the most sophisticated pieces of automotive engineering in the world." Sophia looked to her father, sensing his discomfort, but not fully understanding the social dynamics at play. What she did understand was machinery. Since she was old enough to hold a wrench, she had spent weekends in her Uncle Miguel's auto repair shop, first watching, then helping, and eventually diagnosing problems that sometimes stumped more experienced mechanics. Her bedroom bookshelf held repair manuals alongside children's books, and she often fell asleep reading about combustion cycles and fuel injection systems. "Mia," Eduardo said quietly in Spanish, "you don't have to do this. These men are not being kind." Sophia responded in the same language. "It's okay, Papa. I like fixing things, and the Ferrari has a problem I think I know about." She stepped forward with the natural confidence of a child who hadn't yet learned to be intimidated by wealth or status. "I'd like to look at the car," "Please," she said clearly, her English perfect and unaccented from her years in California schools. Blake's smile widened as he gestured grandly toward the Ferrari, his phone recording every moment. "Be our guest. Just be careful not to scratch anything. That paint job alone cost more than your dad probably makes in a month." Eduardo winced at the casual cruelty, but remained silent, trusting his daughter's judgment while staying close enough to intervene if necessary. Victor looked increasingly uncomfortable with the situation, but seemed unwilling to stop what had been set in motion. Sophia approached the Ferrari methodically, showing none of the awe or intimidation Blake had clearly expected. She studied the engine compartment with the focused attention of someone who understood what she was seeing. The 3.9-liter twin-turbocharged V8 was indeed a marvel of engineering. But to Sophia, it was also a system that operated on principles she had studied extensively. "When did the problem start?" she asked, her voice clear and direct. Victor, caught off guard by her professional tone, answered automatically. "This morning. It was fine yesterday during the drive-up from San Diego, but when I started it today, it began running rough. It almost stalls when I give it gas." Sophia nodded, processing this information as she continued her visual inspection. "Does it make any unusual noises when you try to accelerate?" "A sort of hesitation, like it's catching then dropping," Victor replied, his tone shifting slightly as he found himself engaged in what felt increasingly like a conversation with an actual mechanic rather than a child. Blake, sensing that his entertainment wasn't proceeding as planned, stepped closer. "Maybe you should just tell us what's wrong, since you're clearly an expert," he said, his voice heavy with sarcasm. "Is it the flux capacitor? The dilithium crystals?" Several spectators laughed, and Blake angled his phone to capture both Sophia and the amused audience. The moment was going as he'd hoped, a child out of her depth, about to be humiliated for the entertainment of Westview's elite. What he didn't expect was Sophia's response. Without looking up from her inspection, she replied calmly, "Those aren't real car parts, Mr. Harrington. They're from movies." She continued examining the engine components with methodical precision, unruffled by his mockery. A ripple of surprised laughter moved through the crowd, but this time it wasn't directed at Sophia. Trevor raised an eyebrow at Blake, whose smirk faltered momentarily. Sophia pointed to a section of the engine. "May I use a wrench? I need to check something." Victor hesitated, glancing at Eduardo. "Does she actually know what she's doing?" Before Eduardo could answer, a new voice joined the conversation. "Let her try." Catherine Montgomery, Victor's wife and a pediatric surgeon, approached the group. Unlike her husband and his friends, she observed the scene with a different perspective, one that recognized the unnecessary cruelty being directed at a child. "If she damages anything, we'll handle it. But I'm curious to see what she's thinking." With reluctant permission granted, Eduardo retrieved a toolbox from his groundskeeper cart and brought it to his daughter. Sophia selected a wrench with the confidence of someone who knew precisely what tool was needed. The crowd had grown larger. Now, drawn by the unusual spectacle of a young girl working on an exotic supercar, Blake continued filming, his commentary becoming increasingly forced as he tried to maintain the narrative of an amusing child out of her depth. "Notice how she's choosing a wrench completely at random," he narrated for his social media audience. "This should be entertaining." Sophia ignored him completely, focused entirely on the task at hand. With careful precision, she loosened a component that Blake couldn't even name, her small hands moving with surprising dexterity. "Can someone start the car, please?" she asked, stepping back slightly but keeping her eyes on a specific area of the engine. Victor slid into the driver's seat and turned the key. The Ferrari's engine roared to life, then settled into the rough, uneven idle that had been the source of his frustration. Sophia watched intently, Her head tilted slightly as she listened to the engine's rhythm. "Rev it a little, please," she called out. Victor pressed the accelerator gently. The engine hesitated, coughed, and nearly stalled before catching again, exactly as he had described. Sophia nodded to herself, as if confirming a suspicion. "You can turn it off now." As Victor killed the engine, Sophia turned to the toolbox and selected a different wrench. With methodical precision, she made a small adjustment to something in the engine compartment, her movements displaying a familiarity with mechanical systems that was impossible to fake. "The variable valve timing system is out of adjustment," she said simply, continuing her work. "It controls when the intake and exhaust valves open and close. When it's not calibrated correctly, the engine can't breathe properly, especially under acceleration." A hush fell over the gathered crowd. Blake's phone remained pointed at Sophia, but his narration had stopped entirely. Victor stepped out of the Ferrari and approached the engine compartment, watching Sophia's adjustments with growing amazement. "How do you know about variable valve timing systems?" he asked, his voice carrying genuine curiosity rather than the condescension of earlier. "My Uncle Miguel owns a repair shop," Sophia explained, making another careful adjustment. "I help him on weekends. We had a Maserati come in last month with similar symptoms. Different engine design, but the same basic problem." Catherine Montgomery watched with undisguised admiration while Eduardo stood nearby, his expression a mixture of pride and protective concern. The crowd had grown silent, the expected entertainment of a child's humiliation transforming into something entirely different. Genuine respect for unexpected expertise. After several minutes of careful adjustments, Sophia stepped back. "You can try starting it again?" Victor returned to the driver's seat and turned the key. The Ferrari's engine roared to life with a smooth, even purr that was unmistakably different from its earlier troubled sound. He pressed the accelerator gently, and this time, the engine responded with immediate, powerful acceleration, without hesitation or stutter. "Try it again, harder this time," Sophia suggested. Still watching the engine components, Victor complied, revving the engine more aggressively. The Ferrari responded perfectly, the V8 producing the distinctive thrilling sound that made these vehicles automotive legends. The crowd erupted in spontaneous applause. Victor stepped out of the car, his expression one of complete astonishment. That's perfect. It's running better than before the problem started." Sophia smiled slightly, the first real expression of emotion she had shown since approaching the Ferrari. The adjustment was a little off, even from the factory setting. "It's optimized now." Blake Harrington stood frozen, his phone still recording but forgotten in his hand. What he had planned as an afternoon's cruel entertainment at the expense of a child had instead revealed his own ignorance and prejudice. Worse, it had been captured on his own phone. The evidence of his failed attempt at humiliation preserved in digital form. Catherine Montgomery approached Sophia, her expression warm with genuine admiration. "That was extraordinary. How did you learn to do that?" "By watching and asking questions," Sophia replied simply. "My uncle says engines talk to you if you know how to listen." Victor turned to Eduardo, his demeanor transformed from earlier impatience to genuine respect. "Martinez, your daughter is remarkable. I have mechanics with 20 years of experience who wouldn't have diagnosed that so quickly or accurately." Eduardo nodded, his pride evident, despite his continued discomfort with the situation that had forced his daughter to prove herself in such a public manner. Sophia has always had a gift for understanding how things work. As the implications of what they had just witnessed sank into the crowd's reaction shifted from surprise to a more complex mixture of admiration and self-reflection. Many of Westview's residents had never spoken more than a few words to Eduardo despite his years of service. and none had imagined that his daughter possessed such extraordinary abilities. The judges for the concours d'elegance approached, drawn by the unusual gathering around Victor's Ferrari. Among them was Dr. Laurent Dubois, a renowned automotive engineer whose restoration work was displayed in transportation museums worldwide. He had observed the latter part of Sophia's diagnosis. From the periphery of the crowd, "Excusez-moi," as Dr. Dubois said, his French accent pronounced, despite years in America. "I could not help but observe what happened here. Young lady, your understanding of variable valve timing systems is most impressive." Sophia turned toward the unfamiliar voice, her expression showing the first hint of shyness she had displayed all afternoon. "Thank you, sir." Dr. Dubois turned to Victor. "Mr. Montgomery, your Ferrari is in remarkable condition. And now, thanks to this young lady, it is running at optimal performance." He glanced at Sophia with undisguised admiration. It is rare to see such intuitive understanding of mechanical systems, especially in one so young. Blake Harrington, who had finally stopped recording, struggled to reconcile what he had just witnessed with his preconceptions. His planned humiliation had not only failed, but had become a moment of triumph for someone he had thoughtlessly dismissed. Worse, he had documented his own cruelty and error in judgment for his entire social media following to witness. As the crowd began to disperse, many pausing to congratulate Sophia or express their amazement to Eduardo, Catherine Montgomery approached the young girl with a thoughtful expression. "Sophia," she said gently, "would you be interested in seeing the rest of the cars? Some of them are quite exceptional, and I suspect you'd appreciate them in ways most of us cannot." Sophia's eyes lit up with genuine excitement for the first time. "Could I? I've only seen most of these in books and videos." Catherine glanced at Eduardo, seeking his permission. He nodded, recognizing the genuine respect in her invitation, rather than the condescension that had characterized Blake's earlier interactions with his daughter. As Catherine led Sophia toward the row of classic Ferraris at the far end of the display, Blake approached Eduardo, his usual confidence notably absent. "Martinez," Blake began awkwardly, "I owe you and your daughter an apology. What I planned was ... inappropriate." Eduardo regarded Blake with steady eyes that held neither anger nor forgiveness, simply clear-eyed assessment. "Mr. Harrington, the apology you owe is not to me, but to my daughter, and it should come from genuine understanding of your mistake, not from embarrassment at being proven wrong." With that, Eduardo moved to follow his daughter, leaving Blake to consider how a single mechanical diagnosis had exposed not just a Ferrari's flaw, but the far more significant flaws in his own character and assumptions. The afternoon sun continued to shine on the perfect lawns of Westview Country Club, illuminating rows of automotive perfection. But for many present, the most remarkable sight had not been the multi-million-dollar collection of exotic cars, but the moment when a 9-year-old girl had spoken 3 simple words, variable valve timing, and changed how an entire community saw both her and themselves. Catherine Montgomery guided Sophia through the exclusive collection of vintage and modern supercars, surprised by the depth of the child's knowledge. Unlike other children who might be drawn to flashy colors or sleek designs, Sophia assessed each vehicle with a mechanic's eye, commenting on engineering innovations and design solutions that Catherine herself, despite owning several exotic cars, had never fully appreciated. This 1962 Ferrari 250 GTO has a Colombo V12 engine, Sophia observed, peering through the window of a vehicle worth over $45 million. "Only 36 were ever made. My uncle has a book about them with all the technical specifications." Catherine nodded, increasingly impressed. "That's right. This one belongs to Robert Kensington. He purchased it at auction 3 years ago." As they approached a classic Aston Martin DB5, Sophia's excitement became more evident. "This is just like James Bond's car. But it's the real version without the ejector seat and machine guns. Catherine laughed, charmed by the combination of sophisticated mechanical knowledge and childlike enthusiasm. You know quite a lot about these cars for someone your age. I read everything I can find, Sophia explained simply. Uncle Miguel says understanding comes from study and observation. He lets me help in his shop whenever I visit. Meanwhile, the story of Sophia's Ferrari diagnosis spread through the Concours delegates with remarkable speed, transformed and embellished with each retelling. By the time Catherine and Sophia returned to the Ferrari display, a small group of car collectors and engineers had gathered, curious to meet the child mechanic who had so impressively diagnosed Victor Montgomery's exotic car. Among them was Jonathan Reynolds, owner of Reynolds Automotive Group, one of the largest exotic car dealership networks in Southern California. At 62, with silver hair and the confident bearing of someone accustomed to authority, Reynolds had built his business through a genuine passion for exceptional vehicles and the engineering behind them. "Is this the young lady I've been hearing about?" Reynolds asked as Catherine and Sophia approached. "The one who fixed Victor's valve timing issue." Before Catherine could respond, Blake Harrington reappeared, his composure somewhat restored, but his manner noticeably subdued. The video he had recorded, intended to mock Sophia, had instead captured a moment of extraordinary competence that contrasted sharply with his own behavior. Rather than posting it as planned, he had quietly put his phone away. But not before several spectators had recorded the incident on their own devices. "She did more than fix it," Blake admitted, a reluctant witness to Sophia's achievement. "She identified a problem that two professional mechanics missed during the prevent inspection." Reynolds studied Sophia with professional interest. "Young lady, I understand you diagnosed a variable valve timing issue by sound and observation alone? That's remarkable, even for seasoned mechanics." Sophia, now more reserved in the presence of so many strangers, moved closer to her father, who had rejoined the group. "The engine was telling us what was wrong," she said quietly. "You just have to know how to listen." Eduardo placed a protective hand on his daughter's shoulder, proud of her abilities but concerned about the growing attention. What had begun as Blake's attempt at cruel entertainment had evolved into something more complex, a public recognition of Sophia's extraordinary talent that threatened to overwhelm a child who, despite her mechanical genius, was still only 9 years old. Victor Montgomery, who had been speaking with the Concours judges, returned to the group with evident excitement. "The judges were incredibly impressed with the Ferrari's performance," he announced. "Dr. Dubois said the engine is running at optimal specifications now." He turned to Sophia with genuine gratitude. "Thanks to you, we're still in contention for Best in Show. How can I properly thank you?" Before Sophia could respond, Reynolds stepped forward with the confident authority of someone accustomed to seizing opportunities. "I have a suggestion, if I may. My dealership group sponsors a youth engineering program at California Institute of Technology. We identify promising young talent and provide educational resources, mentorship, and eventually, scholarship opportunities." He looked directly at Eduardo. "Mr. Martinez, your daughter has a remarkable gift. With the right educational support, she could have extraordinary opportunities in automotive engineering or any technical field she chooses." Eduardo's expression reflected both hope and caution, the complicated reaction of a parent who wants every opportunity for their child, while being justifiably wary of sudden interest from wealthy strangers who had previously been indifferent. "At best, that's very generous, Mr. Reynolds," Eduardo replied carefully. "But Sophia is still very young, and her education needs to remain appropriate for her age." Reynolds nodded, understanding the concern. "Of course. Our youth program is designed to supplement regular education, not replace it. The participants meet twice monthly for hands-on projects and mentorship. Everything is supervised and age-appropriate. Catherine Montgomery, who had been observing the conversation with thoughtful attention, turned to her husband. Victor, isn't this similar to the STEM program I've been volunteering with at Children's Hospital? The one that helps identify children with exceptional aptitudes and provides resources their families might not otherwise access. Victor nodded, catching his wife's meaning immediately. It is. That program has been extraordinarily successful, particularly for children from diverse backgrounds. He turned to Eduardo Martinez. I'd be happy to have Catherine explain the structure. As a pediatrician, she's particularly attentive to child development concerns. Eduardo appreciated the respectful tone, so different from the condescension he typically encountered from Westview residents. I would welcome that information, he said. Sophia's education is our highest priority, but our resources are limited. As this conversation continued, Sophia had moved slightly away from the adults, drawn to the Ferrari's engine bay once more. With the precision of someone conducting a final quality check, she examined her earlier work, making a small adjustment that no one else would have noticed was needed. Blake Harrington observed this with growing discomfort. His planned humiliation had completely backfired, revealing not only Sophia's extraordinary abilities, but his own prejudices and cruelty. The contrast between his behavior and Sophia's quiet competence was impossible to ignore, particularly as other Westview residents now engaged with Eduardo with newfound respect. Trevor Wellington, who had earlier joined in Blake's mockery, approached him with a lowered voice. That video you took, you're not still planning to post it, are you? Blake shook his head, uncharacteristically subdued. No, I've deleted it. Smart move, Trevor replied, though I suspect others captured enough of it. Not your finest moment, Blake. Before Blake could respond, a new arrival caused a stir among the gathered car enthusiasts. Alessandro Ferraro, the renowned Italian automotive designer whose work had defined Ferrari's aesthetic for the past decade, approached the group. In California for the Concours d'Elegance as a special judge, Ferraro had heard about the morning's events and come to see for himself. Is this the young mechanical prodigy I've been hearing about? Ferraro asked, his Italian accent pronounced, but his English fluent. Victor made the introduction. Mr. Ferraro, this is Sophia Martinez. She diagnosed and corrected a variable valve timing issue on my 488 Spider that had stumped to professional mechanics. Ferraro studied Sophia with professional interest, noting her careful adjustment of the engine component. Miss Martinez, your reputation precedes you. I understand you identified the issue primarily by sound. Sophia looked up, momentarily starstruck, as she recognized the famous designer whose work she had seen in her uncle's automotive magazines. Yes, sir. The engine hesitation during acceleration was characteristic of valve timing problems. The computer might not detect it if it's within general parameters, but it still affects performance. Ferraro's eyebrows rose, impressed by both her diagnosis and her articulation of the problem. That's precisely correct. Even our diagnostic computers can miss subtle timing issues if they're within the broad acceptable range. The human ear, a trained one, can detect problems that sometimes elude electronic analysis. He turned to Eduardo. Mr. Martinez, your daughter has an extraordinary gift. I've met professional mechanics with 20 years of experience who lack her intuitive understanding of engine dynamics. Eduardo nodded, pride evident in his expression, despite his continued concern about the growing attention focused on his daughter. She has always had a special connection with machines. Even as a very young child, she could disassemble and reassemble complex toys without instruction. The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Dr. Laurent Dubois, who had completed his judging responsibilities and returned to speak with Sophia directly. At 68, with decades of experience in automotive engineering, Dubois recognized in Sophia something he had rarely encountered: a natural mechanical intuition that couldn't be taught, only developed. "Young lady," Dr. Dubois said, addressing Sophia directly, "I would like to show you something, if you are interested." Sophia looked to her father for permission. Eduardo nodded, now more comfortable with the genuine respect being shown to his daughter. Dr. Dubois led Sophia to a cordoned-off area where the rarest vehicles were displayed, including his own restoration project, a 1936 Bugatti Type 57 SC Atlantic, one of only two in existence. The flowing lines and distinctive design made it immediately recognizable to Sophia from her reading. "This is the most valuable car in the world," she whispered, genuine awe in her voice. "The other one is in a museum." Dr. Dubois smiled, pleased. By her recognition, indeed, this represents not just automotive history, but a pinnacle of engineering for its era. "What I wish to show you is how the solutions of the past inform the engineering of the present." He carefully opened the hood, revealing the straight-eight engine that had been revolutionary in its time. As he explained the mechanical innovations, Sophia listened with complete attention, asking questions that reflected both her existing knowledge and her eagerness to learn more. Meanwhile, Catherine Montgomery had drawn Eduardo aside to discuss educational opportunities for Sophia in more concrete terms. The program won volunteer with partners with several prestigious engineering programs, Catherine explained. They provide mentorship, educational resources, and eventually, scholarship opportunities for children with exceptional aptitude in STEM fields. She was careful to maintain a tone of collaborative planning rather than charity, understanding that Eduardo's primary concern was for his daughter's well-being rather than her advancement. The focus is on nurturing talent without creating undue pressure. Children participate in age-appropriate activities while building foundations for future education. Eduardo listened attentively, weighing the potential benefits against his concerns. About Sophia being treated as an oddity or being pushed too quickly. "My daughter loves learning, especially about mechanical systems, but she also deserves a normal childhood. I worry about her becoming a curiosity rather than a child." Catherine nodded, understanding completely. "That's precisely why these programs are valuable. They create environments where exceptional children can develop their talents, while interacting with peers who share their interests. Sophia wouldn't be isolated or treated as unusual. She'd be among other children with different but equally remarkable aptitudes." As they discussed the practical aspects of the program, Blake Harrington observed from a distance, still processing, how thoroughly his attempt at cruel entertainment had transformed into something entirely different. What had begun as mockery had instead revealed his own limitations and prejudices, particularly as he watched Eduardo and Catherine engage in serious conversation about educational opportunities that could fundamentally change Sophia's future. Mark Davies approached Blake, his expression suggesting he had also recognized the significance of the morning's events. "You've opened quite a Pandora's box with your little stunt," he commented quietly. Blake nodded, uncharacteristically reflective. "I didn't expect any of this." "Clearly," Mark replied dryly. "You might want to consider some damage control. That video is already circulating among the staff. Martinez has worked here for 15 years, and he's well liked. This doesn't reflect well on you." Blake's discomfort deepened as he realized the broader implications. His position in Westview's social hierarchy had always seemed secure, built on financial success and carefully cultivated connections. Yet, in one morning, his attempt to humiliate a child had revealed character flaws that wouldn't be easily dismissed among a community that valued its self-image of enlightened privilege. Near the Bugatti display, Sophia was engaged in animated conversation with Dr. Dubois and Alessandro Ferraro, her initial shyness forgotten as they discussed the mechanical principles that connected vintage vehicles to their modern counterparts. Despite her youth, She engaged with complex engineering concepts that many adults would struggle to grasp, asking questions that reflected both her existing knowledge and her eagerness to learn more. The early Bugatti used double overhead camshafts. When most engines had much simpler valve systems, Sophia noted, pointing to a specific component. That's similar to what modern high-performance engines do, just with computerized timing control now. Dr. Dubois nodded, impressed by her observation. Precisely. The principles remain constant, even as the implementation evolves. This is what separates a true engineer from someone who merely follows procedures, understanding the fundamental principles rather than just the specific applications. Alessandro Ferraro studied Sophia with growing interest. Ms. Martinez, your understanding of these mechanical relationships is remarkable. Have you had any formal engineering education beyond your regular schooling? Sophia shook her head. No, sir. I just read everything I can find, and my uncle lets me help in his shop. I like figuring out how things work. Ferraro exchanged glances with Dr. Dubois, both recognizing in Sophia's straightforward approach to mechanical problems something that couldn't be taught, an intuitive grasp of engineering principles that typically emerged only after years of formal study, if at all. Your uncle has taught you well, Ferraro said. But with structured educational support, your natural abilities could develop in extraordinary ways. As they continued their discussion, Jonathan Reynolds approached Victor Montgomery with a proposal that reflected both business acumen and genuine interest in Sophia's development. Victor, I'd like to establish a scholarship fund specifically for promising young mechanics from underrepresented backgrounds, Reynolds said quietly. What happened this morning made me realize we're probably missing extraordinary talent by limiting our recruitment to traditional channels. Victor nodded thoughtfully. Catherine would be very interested in helping structure something like that. Her work with the Children's Hospital has shown her how many exceptional children never receive the opportunities their abilities deserve. Reynolds glanced towards Sophia, who was still engaged in animated conversation with the automotive experts. That young lady diagnosed in minutes what professional mechanics missed entirely. It makes you wonder how many other Sophias are out there, lacking only the opportunity to demonstrate their abilities. The conversation was interrupted by the announcement that the Concours d'Elegance judging results would be presented shortly. Car owners and spectators began moving toward the awards pavilion, where crystal trophies awaited the winners in various categories. Eduardo approached his daughter, aware that they had already spent far longer at the event than he had initially planned. Sophia, we should go soon. I still have work to finish, and your mother will be wondering where we are. Sophia nodded, though her expression showed reluctance to leave the rare automobiles and the experts who had treated her knowledge with genuine respect. Yes, Papa, she turned to Dr. Dubois and Alessandro Ferraro. Thank you for showing me the Bugatti, Dr. Dubois, and thank you for explaining the aerodynamic principles, Mr. Ferraro. Both men smiled, charmed by her combination of childlike enthusiasm and precocious understanding. It was our pleasure, Miss Martinez, Dr. Dubois replied formally. Perhaps we will have the opportunity to continue our discussion at a future event. As Eduardo and Sophia prepared to leave, Victor Montgomery approached them once more. Martinez, before you go, I'd like to speak with you privately tomorrow about some ideas Catherine and I have discussed. Would you be available after your shift? Eduardo nodded, recognizing that the conversation would likely involve educational opportunities for Sophia. Yes, Mr. Montgomery. I finish at 4 tomorrow. Excellent. And Sophia, Victor continued, addressing the girl directly, thank you again for your help with the Ferrari. You've taught all of us something important today. Sophia smiled, pleased by the acknowledgement, but seemingly unaware of how profoundly she had disrupted Westview's social expectations. You're welcome, Mr. Montgomery. I'm glad I could help the Ferrari run better. As Eduardo and Sophia made their way across the manicured lawn toward the staff area, Blake Harrington watched them go, still processing how thoroughly his cruel prank had backfired. What he had intended, as momentary entertainment at a child's expense, had instead revealed extraordinary talent that might otherwise have remained hidden. While exposing his own prejudices to uncomfortable scrutiny, with uncharacteristic humility, Blake recognized that he needed to make amends in a more meaningful way than a hasty apology offered in the moment of embarrassment. The question was whether he could find a path to genuine redemption, or if his social standing at Westview had been permanently damaged by the morning's events. At the awards pavilion, the Concours judges prepared to announce their decisions, unaware that the most significant outcome of the day had nothing to do with trophies or recognition for automotive excellence. In the space of one morning, a 9-year-old girl's 3 words, variable valve timing, had not only restored a Ferrari to peak performance, but had also challenged fundamental assumptions about talent, opportunity, and the invisible barriers that often separate potential from achievement. 3 weeks after the Westview Concours, Delegance Eduardo Martinez parked his weathered Toyota pickup truck outside the gleaming glass headquarters of Reynolds Automotive Group in Newport Beach. The 10-year-old vehicle, meticulously maintained but showing its age, looked conspicuously out of place among the Maseratis and Bentleys that filled the visitor parking area. Sophia sat beside him in the passenger seat, dressed in her best clothes, a simple blue dress with a white cardigan that her mother had carefully ironed that morning. "Remember, Mia," Eduardo said gently in Spanish as they prepared to enter the building, "this meeting is just to learn about the program. We're not making any decisions today." Sophia nodded, unusually quiet. The past 3 weeks had brought unexpected changes to her life. Word of her Ferrari diagnosis had spread throughout Westview Heights and beyond, transformed by repeated tellings into a story that bordered on mechanical mythology. Video clips of her calmly explaining variable valve timing to astonished millionaires had circulated on social media, attracting attention from automotive enthusiasts and educational institutions alike. The Martinez family had experienced the sudden interest in their daughter with a mixture of pride and protective concern. Sophia's mother, Alina, who worked as a nurse at a community clinic, had initially been skeptical about the educational programs being offered, worried that her daughter might be treated as a curiosity rather than a child with extraordinary potential. Eduardo shared these concerns, but also recognized that they couldn't provide Sophia with the resources her abilities deserved. "Papa," Sophia said as they approached the gleaming entrance, "will Mr. Reynolds' program let me keep working with Uncle Miguel at his shop?" The question revealed what mattered most to Sophia, not recognition or advancement, but the hands-on experience of solving mechanical problems and the special relationship she had with her uncle, who had first recognized and nurtured her unusual aptitude. "Yes," Mia, Eduardo assured her. "I made that very clear when I spoke with Mrs. Montgomery. Any program must allow you to continue learning in practical ways, not just from books and computers." The lobby of Reynolds Automotive Group featured a rotating display of exotic cars, currently showcasing a stunning Pagani Huayra with its gull-wing doors raised. Sophia's eyes widened at the sight of the hypercar she had only seen in magazines, momentarily forgetting her nervousness about the meeting ahead. "That's a Pagani Huayra," she whispered to her father. "It has a twin turbocharged V12 engine developed by Mercedes-AMG, and its bodywork uses a special carbon titanium composite that's stronger than regular carbon fiber." Eduardo smiled at his daughter's encyclopedic knowledge. "You know more about these cars than I ever will." Sophia, a receptionist, greeted them with the practiced warmth of someone accustomed to welcoming wealthy clients rather than groundskeepers and their children. "Mr. Martinez and Sophia, Mr. Reynolds is expecting you. Please follow me." They were led not to an executive office, but to a large well-lit space, that Eduardo realized was some kind of educational workshop. Workbenches equipped with precision tools lined the walls, while the center of the room featured several partially disassembled engines mounted on stands. Large diagrams and interactive digital displays covered the walls, illustrating everything from combustion cycles to aerodynamic principles. Jonathan Reynolds stood conversing with Catherine Montgomery and a woman Eduardo didn't recognize, who was dressed casually in jeans and a button-up shirt rather than the business attire he had expected. All three turned as Eduardo and Sophia entered. "Mr. Martinez, Sophia, welcome," Reynolds said, approaching with an extended hand. "Thank you for coming today." Eduardo shook Reynolds' hand with the firm grip of someone unintimidated by wealth or status. "Thank you for inviting us, Mr. Reynolds." Catherine Montgomery smiled warmly at Sophia. "Hello again, Sophia. I'm so glad you could come see the program facility." Reynolds gestured to the woman Eduardo hadn't recognized. "This is Dr. Elaine Chen, professor of mechanical engineering at California Institute of Technology and the academic director of our youth engineering program." Dr. Chen approached with a friendly smile, addressing Sophia directly rather than speaking through the adults. "I've heard a lot about you, Sophia. I understand you have a special talent for diagnosing mechanical problems." Sophia nodded, still somewhat shy in this unfamiliar environment. "I just like figuring out how things work." Dr. Chen's smile widened. "That's exactly what engineering is, figuring out how things work, and then making them work better. Would you like to see what we do in this program?" With Sophia's nod, Dr. Chen led them on a tour of the facility, explaining how the youth program operated. Twice monthly, participants gathered for hands-on projects supervised by Caltech graduate students and professional engineers. The curriculum combined practical mechanical work with age-appropriate instruction in the underlying scientific principles. "We believe in learning by doing," Dr. Chen explained as they examined a cutaway model of a Formula One racing engine. "Theory is important, but there's no substitute for hands-on experience when developing mechanical intuition." Sophia, who had remained quiet during the initial introductions, became increasingly animated as she saw the equipment and projects. When they reached a diagnostic station where students could troubleshoot deliberately introduced mechanical problems, her eyes lit up with genuine excitement. "This is a simulator," Dr. Chen explained. "We can program various mechanical issues, and students use both diagnostic equipment and their own senses to identify the problems." Without prompting, Sophia approached the simulator, studying its layout. With the focused attention Eduardo had seen countless times in his brother Miguel's shop. "Can I try it?" she asked, looking to Dr. Chen. "Of course," Dr. Chen replied, nodding to a teaching assistant who activated the system. "This one is programmed with multiple issues in the fuel delivery system. See what you can identify." As Sophia engaged with the simulator, Eduardo spoke quietly with Reynolds and Catherine Montgomery about the practical aspects of the program, scheduling, transportation, and the all-important question of costs. "The program is fully funded through our corporate foundation and educational partners," Reynolds explained. "There are no costs to participants or their families." Catherine added, "Transportation can be arranged if needed. Several participants come from areas quite distant from Newport Beach." Eduardo watched his daughter as she methodically worked through the diagnostic simulator, her small hands moving with confident precision as she checked various components. "My concern is not about logistics or costs," he said finally. "It's about whether this environment will nurture Sophia as a whole person, not just as a mechanical prodigy." Reynolds nodded, understanding Eduardo's concern. "That's precisely why Dr. Chen oversees the program rather than someone from the corporate side. Her background includes child development as well as engineering. Perhaps she can address your concerns better than I can." Dr. Chen had been observing Sophia's work on the simulator with professional interest. After just 7 minutes, Sophia looked up with a satisfied expression. "There are 3 problems," she announced. "The fuel pressure regulator is malfunctioning. There's a restriction in the 3rd injector, and the fuel pump is underperforming." The teaching assistant checked the simulator's settings with evident surprise. "That's exactly right. Most first-time users take at least 20 minutes to identify all 3 issues." Dr. Chen smiled at Sophia's achievement, but showed no surprise. "Excellent diagnostic work, Sophia." She turned to Eduardo. "Mr. Martinez, your daughter has remarkable abilities, but I understand your concerns about her development as a whole person." She gestured toward a different area of the facility, where photographs showed students of various ages engaged in group projects. "Our program emphasizes collaboration and communication, not just technical skills. Participants learn to explain their thinking, work together on complex problems, and appreciate different approaches to engineering challenges." Eduardo studied the photographs, noting the diverse group of children and the engaged expressions on their faces. "Sophia has always been somewhat isolated by her interests," he admitted. "Few children her age share her fascination with mechanical systems. That isolation can be difficult," Dr. Chen agreed. "Here, she would meet others with similar aptitudes, though perhaps in different areas of science and engineering. We find that gifted children benefit enormously from discovering their not alone in their intensity and curiosity." As they continued discussing the program, the door to the facility opened, and Blake Harrington entered, accompanied by a boy who appeared to be about 12 years old. Blake stopped abruptly when he saw Eduardo and Sophia, clearly not having expected to encounter them. An uncomfortable silence fell over the group as Blake struggled to compose himself. The boy beside him, sensing the sudden tension, looked between the adults with evident confusion. Catherine Montgomery broke the awkward moment with practiced social grace. "Blake, I didn't realize you would be visiting the program today." Blake nodded, his usual confidence noticeably diminished. "My nephew Michael has been expressing interest in engineering. Jonathan suggested I bring him to see the facility." He turned to Eduardo, his discomfort evident, but his tone sincere. "Mr. Martinez. Sophia, it's good to see you again." Eduardo acknowledged Blake with a slight nod, his expression neutral. Since the concours d'elegance, he had neither sought nor avoided interactions with Blake, maintaining the professional distance that had characterized their relationship before the Ferrari incident. Blake hesitated, then continued with what appeared to be difficult for him. "Mr. Martinez, I've been hoping for an opportunity to speak with you more formally. What happened at the concours, my behavior toward Sophia, was inexcusable. I've spent considerable time reflecting on my actions and their implications." The sincerity in Blake's voice surprised Eduardo, who had expected either avoidance or a superficial apology designed to repair Blake's social standing rather than address the underlying issues. Before Eduardo could respond, Sophia approached, having completed her work on the simulator. "Hello, Mr. Harrington," she said with the straightforward manner that had impressed so many at the concours. There was no trace of resentment in her voice, just the simple acknowledgement of someone she had met previously. Blake seemed momentarily at a loss for words, struck by Sophia's lack of animosity. "Hello, Sophia. This is my nephew, Michael." Michael, a lanky boy with his uncle's features, but none of his practiced social confidence, nodded shyly. "Hi, are you the girl who fixed the Ferrari? My uncle told me about it." Sophia nodded. "Yes. It had a veritable valve timing problem." Michael's eyes widened with genuine interest. "That's really cool. I'm trying to learn about cars, but I'm better with computers than engines." This simple exchange between the children seemed to ease the tension among the adults. Dr. Chen, recognizing an opportunity to demonstrate the program's collaborative nature, addressed both children. Michael has been working on a computer simulation of engine performance. Sophia, would you be interested in seeing it? Your understanding of real engines might provide valuable insights. As the children moved toward a computer workstation with Dr. Chen, the adults watched with varying expressions. Eduardo with paternal pride, tinged with caution. Reynolds with professional interest. Catherine with warm approval, and Blake with what appeared to be genuine regret, mixed with newfound awareness. Martinez, Blake said quietly, I've been doing a lot of thinking since the concours. My behavior wasn't just cruel to Sophia, it reflected assumptions and prejudices I hadn't fully acknowledged, even to myself. Eduardo studied Blake carefully, assessing the sincerity of his words. Mr. Harrington, I've worked at Westview for 15 years. I've become accustomed to being treated as invisible by many members. But when that attitude extended to my daughter, that was different. Blake nodded, accepting the implicit rebuke. You're right, and it wasn't just about Sophia. It was about not seeing you, any of the staff, as full people with lives and families and talents beyond what serves Westview members. Reynolds and Catherine exchanged glances, both recognizing the significance of this conversation, but allowing it to unfold without interference. Blake continued, his usual polish replaced by uncomfortable but necessary honesty. I've made a contribution to the scholarship program, he said, anonymous, and with no strings attached. Not to ease my conscience, but because what happened with Sophia made me realize how many talented young people never get opportunities because of assumptions like mine. Eduardo's expression remained measured, neither accepting nor rejecting Blake's gesture. Apologies and contributions are meaningful only if they represent real change, Mr. Harrington. I understand that, Blake replied. Which is why I've also joined the Community Outreach Committee at Westview. We're developing a program to identify and support promising students from the service. Staff's families, educational resources, mentorship, even job shadowing for older students interested in professional careers. This concrete action, more than words or monetary contributions, seemed to register with Eduardo. That is, a positive step. At the computer workstation, Sophia and Michael had quickly moved past initial shyness and were engaged in animated conversation about engine simulation parameters. Michael was explaining his computer model, while Sophia suggested adjustments based on her practical experience with real engines. Preparing and narrating this type of story took us long efforts and hard work. So if you are enjoying the story, please consider subscribing to our channel. The simulation shows maximum efficiency at this fuel mixture, Michael explained, pointing to the screen. But actual engines don't always perform the way the models predict. Sophia nodded eagerly. That's because real engines have variations and wear patterns that affect performance. My uncle says theory is a starting point, but you always need to tune based on how the actual engine responds. Dr. Chen observed their interaction with professional satisfaction. They complement each other well, she commented to the watching adults. Michael has strong theoretical understanding, but limited hands-on experience. Sophia has extraordinary practical knowledge, but could benefit from more exposure to the underlying mathematical principles. Reynolds nodded thoughtfully. That's precisely what this program aims to achieve, bringing together young people with different strengths and approaches to problem solving. As the children continued their collaboration, Catherine drew Eduardo aside to address some of the practical concerns he had expressed earlier. The program includes regular parent involvement, she explained. You and your wife would be welcome to observe sessions, participate in family engineering events, and provide input on Sophia's experience. Eduardo appreciated this consideration, which addressed one of his primary concerns, that Sophia might be separated from her family culture and values while developing her mechanical talents. That would be important to us. We want Sophia to have opportunities, but not at the cost of her connection to her family and community. Catherine nodded, understanding. The most successful participants have strong family support. The program is designed to enhance, not replace, the guidance you provide as parents. Blake, who had been watching his nephew's animated conversation with Sophia, turned back to Eduardo with a question that seemed to genuinely matter to him. Do you think children like Michael and Sophia, from such different backgrounds, can move past the divisions our generation has maintained? Eduardo considered the question seriously, watching as Sophia enthusiastically explained something about engine timing to Michael, who listened with rapt attention. Children see possibilities, not barriers, he said finally. They recognize competence and shared interests more readily than differences in privilege or background. The question is whether we adults will allow those natural connections to flourish or impose our own limitations on their relationships. Blake nodded slowly, processing Eduardo's response. I'd like to think we can do better for them than what we've accepted for ourselves. Reynolds, who had been observing both the children's interaction and the adults' conversation, stepped forward with practical next steps. Mr. Martinez, there's no pressure for an immediate decision about Sophia's participation. We encourage families to consider all aspects carefully. Perhaps Sophia might attend a single session as a guest, to see how she feels about the environment and the other participants. Eduardo nodded, appreciating the lack of pressure. That seems reasonable. I'll discuss it with my wife tonight. As the visit concluded and they prepared to leave, Sophia approached her father with barely contained excitement. Papa, Michael showed me a computer program that can simulate different engine configurations without having to build them. You can change parameters and see how they affect performance. It's amazing. Eduardo smiled at his daughter's enthusiasm, recognizing that despite his caution, the program offered learning opportunities that neither he nor his brother Miguel could provide, despite their best intentions. Did you enjoy working with the simulation? Sophia nodded vigorously. It helps explain why some of the adjustments Uncle Miguel makes work the way they do. There's math behind everything, even when we can't see it. This innocent observation, connecting theoretical principles to practical applications, captured exactly what the program aimed to achieve. Dr. Chen exchanged glances with Reynolds, both recognizing in Sophia's comment a natural engineering mindset that transcended her limited formal education. As Eduardo and Sophia prepared to leave, Blake approached once more, his nephew at his side. Martinez, Blake said, regardless of your decision about the program, I hope you'll allow Michael and Sophia to stay in contact. My nephew hasn't stopped talking about engines since he heard about what happened at the concours. Meeting someone like Sophia, who understands the practical side of what he's studying theoretically, could be valuable for both of them. Eduardo considered the request, looking between the hopeful expression on Michael's face and the excited anticipation on Sophia's. Despite his lingering reservations about Blake himself, he recognized the potential value of this connection for his daughter. We'll see. Perhaps Michael could visit Miguel's shop sometime, see what practical mechanical work involves. This modest opening, neither a full embrace of new possibilities nor a rejection of them, seemed to satisfy everyone present. As goodbyes were exchanged and Eduardo led Sophia back to their pickup truck, Catherine Montgomery watched them go with thoughtful attention. Do you think they'll accept the program opportunity? Reynolds asked her quietly. Catherine considered the question carefully. I believe they will, but on their own terms. Eduardo is right to be protective of how Sophia's talent is developed. The most important outcome isn't just nurturing her mechanical abilities, but ensuring she grows up with both exceptional skills and the character to use them wisely. Reynolds nodded agreement. After seeing her at the concours, not just her technical abilities, but how she handled herself in a situation designed to humiliate her, I'd say the Martinez family has already succeeded remarkably well in that regard. As Eduardo's pickup truck pulled away from the gleaming corporate headquarters, Sophia bubbled with excitement about everything she had seen and learned. Yet amid her enthusiasm about diagnostic simulators and computer modeling, what seemed to have impressed her most was something altogether different. "Papa," she said thoughtfully, "Michael said his uncle told him he was wrong about people like us, that we know things and have values worth learning from. Is that why Mr. Harrington seemed different today?" Eduardo glanced at his daughter, once again struck by her perceptiveness about human dynamics as well as mechanical systems. "Perhaps people can change when they're forced to see beyond their assumptions. What happened with the Ferrari made Mr. Harrington and others see us, differently." Sophia considered this as they drove toward home, the gleaming towers of Newport Beach giving way to more modest neighborhoods. "I still don't understand why fixing the Ferrari was such a big deal. Engines are just puzzles with moving parts. Anyone could learn if they paid attention." This innocent perspective, the belief that capabilities were determined by interest and effort rather than inherent differences or social position, represented exactly what Eduardo and Alina had tried to instill in their daughter, despite the social barriers they themselves had encountered. It was this combination of exceptional talent and grounded values that had impressed everyone from Dr. Chen to Victor Montgomery, and even, belatedly, Blake Harrington. "Not everyone sees the world as clearly as you do, Sophia," Eduardo replied simply. "But sometimes, moments like what happened with the Ferrari help people reconsider what they thought they knew." As they continued their journey home, Eduardo reflected on how his daughter's 3 words, variable valve timing, had initiated changes that extended far beyond a repaired engine. The ripples from that moment were still expanding, creating possibilities not just for Sophia, but potentially for other children whose talents might otherwise have remained unrecognized behind the invisible barriers of class and preconception. 6 months after the Westview Concours, Diligence, the Reynolds Youth Engineering Program held its first semester showcase at the California Science Center in Los Angeles. The grand atrium, typically home to aerospace exhibits, had been transformed into a display of student projects ranging from robotics to sustainable energy systems. Among the exhibits stood a meticulously constructed cutaway model of a hybrid engine system, its components color-coded to illustrate the integration of conventional and electric power sources. Sophia Martinez made final adjustments to her display, her small hands moving with the same precise confidence that had astonished onlookers when she diagnosed the Ferrari's valve timing issue. At 9, she remained small for her age, but her presence had evolved in subtle ways, a quiet self-assurance that came from finding her place among peers who shared her fascination with mechanical systems and adults who respected her abilities, without treating her as a curiosity. "The power transfer system needs to balance efficiency with response time," Sophia explained to a group of visitors gathering around her exhibit. "When the combustion engine and electric motor work together properly, you get better performance and lower emissions." Among those listening was Dr. Adrian Patel, the head of mechanical engineering at Stanford University, who had come specifically to observe the program's participants after hearing about Reynolds' innovative approach to identifying and nurturing technical talent from diverse backgrounds. He studied Sophia's presentation with professional interest, noting both her technical accuracy and her ability to explain complex systems in accessible language. "What happens when the computer that manages this integration fails?" Dr. Patel asked, deliberately posing a question that went beyond the exhibit's visible components. Sophia considered this thoughtfully. "If the integration management system fails, you need a fallback protocol. Our design includes a mechanical override that defaults to the combustion engine while isolating the electrical components to prevent cascade failures." Dr. Patel nodded, impressed not just by the answer, but by the underlying thinking it revealed. a natural engineer's instinct for anticipating failure points and designing preventative measures. That's exactly right. Redundancy and failure management are as important as optimal performance in any complex system. Nearby, Michael Harrington presented his complementary project, a computer simulation that modeled the hybrid engine's performance under various conditions. The collaboration between Sophia's hands-on mechanical expertise and Michael's computational modeling had produced results that impressed even the professional engineers who mentored the program. We can simulate different driving conditions and see how the power management system responds, Michael explained to visitors, his initial shyness replaced by genuine enthusiasm for sharing his work. Highway cruising, city stop and go steep. Mountain roads, each scenario requires different optimization parameters. Alina Martinez watched her daughter's presentation from a short distance away, her expression reflecting both pride and a mother's perpetual concern about a child thrust into the spotlight. At 41, Elena's practical intelligence and strong values had shaped their family life and guided Sophia's development, long before wealthy patrons and educational programs had entered the picture. As a nurse who had worked her way through community college while raising a young child, she understood both the value of educational opportunities and the potential costs of accelerated advancement. She seems to be thriving, Catherine Montgomery said quietly, joining Alina at her observation point. Over the past 6 months, the two women had developed an unexpected friendship, bridging their different circumstances through their shared commitment to nurturing children's potential in healthy ways. Alina nodded, her watchful eyes never leaving her daughter. The program has been good for her, not just the technical learning, but being with other children who think the way she does. She's less isolated now. Catherine understood the complex emotions behind Elena's measured response. You were right to insist on your conditions for her participation. Keeping her connected to your family and community while she develops these opportunities has been crucial. Those conditions had been non-negotiable for the Martinez family. Sophia would continue attending her local school rather than transferring to an accelerated program. She would maintain her weekend work with Uncle Miguel at his auto shop. Family obligations would take precedence over program activities when necessary, and any public attention focused on her achievements would be carefully managed to protect her privacy and normal development. We didn't want Sophia to feel she had to choose between her talents and her identity, Alina explained simply. Her abilities with machines are remarkable, but they're just one part of who she is. Across the exhibition hall, Blake Harrington observed his nephew's animated conversation with visitors, noting the easy collaboration between Michael and Sophia. As they alternated explaining different aspects of their joint project, the past 6 months had brought significant changes for Blake as well, some visible in his behavior and priorities, others in less obvious but more fundamental shifts in perspective, quite different from what you expected at the isn't it? Jonathan Reynolds commented, joining Blake at his observation point. Blake nodded, acknowledging the reference to his failed attempt at humiliating Sophia. In more ways than I could have anticipated, he admitted. Michael was always bright, but he was withdrawn, hesitant to engage with his interests. This program, and particularly his work with Sophia, has transformed him. Reynolds studied Blake with the analytical attention he brought to evaluating people, as well as business opportunities, and as this experience changed your perspective as well. Before Blake could respond, Dr. Adrian Patel approached them, his expression suggesting he had just witnessed something that had impressed him professionally. Reynolds, that Martinez girl is extraordinary. Her intuitive grasp of mechanical systems, coupled with her ability to articulate engineering principles, I've rarely seen that combination in students twice her age. Reynolds nodded, unsurprised by Patel's assessment. Sophia has consistently exceeded expectations since joining the program. Her collaboration with Michael Harrington has been particularly productive. Her hands-on intuition combined with his computational modeling creates results neither could achieve alone. Patel glanced toward Blake with sudden recognition. Harrington, is that your son working with her? My nephew, Blake clarified. Though I'd like to claim some credit for his talents, those are entirely his own. The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Victor Montgomery, who had taken a more active role in the Reynolds program since witnessing Sophia's Ferrari diagnosis. As CEO of Montgomery Technologies, Victor had contributed both funding and technical resources to expand the program's reach beyond Newport Beach to communities throughout Southern California. Patel, good to see you, Victor greeted the Stanford professor. I'm glad you could observe today's showcase. These young people represent exactly the kind of diverse talent pool that universities and corporations need to cultivate. As the men continued their conversation about educational pathways and opportunity expansion, Eduardo Martinez moved through the exhibition hall, observing the various projects with the thoughtful attention of someone evaluating far more than technical merit. At 52, his experiences had taught him to look beyond surface achievements to the character development happening behind them. He paused near a project created by Zoe Washington, a 12-year-old from South Los Angeles whose sustainable water filtration system had direct applications for her community's environmental challenges. The seriousness with which she addressed practical problems affecting real people resonated with Eduardo's values more than abstract technical achievements. Mr. Martinez, Dr. Elaine Chen greeted him, joining his observation of Zoe's project. What do you think of the showcase? Eduardo considered the question carefully. The technical accomplishments are impressive, he acknowledged, but what matters more is how these young people are learning to use their abilities, whether they're developing skills to solve real problems or simply pursuing technical challenges for their own sake. Dr. Chen nodded, appreciating his perspective. That's precisely why we've incorporated community impact assessments into each project. Students must consider how their work affects real people and environments, not just how it functions technically. This alignment with his own values reassured Eduardo, who had remained cautiously supportive of Sophia's participation, while watching carefully for signs that the program might separate her from the grounded perspective he and Alina had worked to instill. Their conversation was interrupted by an announcement that the formal presentations would begin in 15 minutes. Participants and their families moved toward the central auditorium, where each student would have 3 minutes to explain their project's core innovation and significance. Blake Harrington found himself seated beside Eduardo and Alina Martinez, an arrangement that would have been unthinkable 6 months earlier. The social distance that had once seemed unbridgeable had not disappeared entirely, but it had diminished through their children's collaboration and their own repeated interactions at program events. Your daughter has been an excellent influence on Michael, Blake said quietly, as they waited for the presentations to begin. He talks about her approach to problem-solving constantly, how she sees mechanical relationships that aren't obvious to others. Alina studied Blake with the measured assessment of someone not easily impressed by words alone. Over the months, she had observed his behavior change from the entitled arrogance that had characterized his treatment of Sophia at the concours to something approaching genuine respect, not just for her daughter's abilities, but for the values that had shaped her development. Michael has contributed significantly to Sophia's progress as well, Alina acknowledged. She's learning to appreciate theoretical models in addition to hands-on experimentation. They balance each other's approaches. This simple observation, recognizing the mutual benefit of the children's collaboration, rather than just acknowledging Sophia's influence on Michael, reflected the gradual shift in dynamics between the families. What had begun as wealthy patrons discovering and supporting a prodigy had evolved into something more nuanced, a recognition that children from very different backgrounds could contribute equally valuable perspectives to shared challenges on stage. Dr. Elaine Chen welcomed the audience and explained the showcase format. Each student or team would present their project's core innovation, followed by a brief explanation of its potential real-world applications. Judges from academia and industry would evaluate the presentations based on technical merit, communication clarity, and practical significance. Our program's philosophy centers on developing not just technical skills, but also the ability to communicate complex ideas effectively and connect theoretical knowledge to practical applications, Dr. Chen explained. These young engineers are learning that the most sophisticated solution has limited value if it cannot be implemented in real-world contexts. The presentations began with younger participants, whose projects ranged from simplified electric motors to basic robotic systems. Despite their youth, each student demonstrated remarkable poise and technical understanding for their age, reflecting the program's emphasis on communication skills alongside technical development. As Michael and Sophia's turn approached, Blake noticed Eduardo's hand move to cover Elena's in a gesture of quiet support. The simple action, a parent's instinctive response to their child facing a challenge, struck Blake forcefully, highlighting the common ground of parental concern that transcended their different circumstances. Michael and Sophia took the stage together, their complementary presentation reflecting the seamless integration of their different strengths. Michael explained the theoretical framework and computational modeling, while Sophia articulated the mechanical principles and practical applications of their hybrid engine system. The key innovation in our design is the adaptive power transfer protocol, Sophia explained, her clear voice carrying confidently through the auditorium. Unlike fixed-ratio hybrid systems, our design continuously optimizes the balance between combustion and electric power based on real-time performance requirements. Michael continued seamlessly. Our simulation demonstrates that this adaptive approach improves overall efficiency by 23% compared to conventional hybrid systems, while reducing emissions by an additional 17% under varied driving conditions. What impressed the audience most, however, was not the technical specifications, but the natural collaboration between the two children. How they had integrated their different approaches and strengths to create something neither could have achieved alone. Their 3-minute presentation received the showcase's first spontaneous applause, with several industry judges making notes with evident interest. As the presentations continued, Victor Montgomery leaned toward Jonathan Reynolds with a quiet observation. "We've created something significant here, beyond the individual projects. These children are developing collaborative approaches that most corporate teams never achieve." Reynolds nodded agreement. The program's diversity, not just in participants' backgrounds but in their thinking styles and approaches, creates a remarkably productive dynamic. Sophia and Michael exemplify this perfectly. Following the formal presentations, participants returned to their exhibits for the judges' individual evaluations. Dr. Adrian Patel spent considerable time with Sophia and Michael, asking detailed questions about their design decisions and the trade-offs they had considered. "Your integration of mechanical and computational approaches is impressive," Dr. Patel concluded. "This kind of collaborative problem-solving represents the future of engineering practice." As the showcase concluded and families prepared to depart, Blake approached Eduardo and Elena with an invitation that reflected how far the relationship between their families had evolved. "Michael's birthday is next Saturday," Blake explained. "He's asked if Sophia might attend his celebration. It won't be a typical children's party. He's requested a visit to the Peterson Automotive Museum followed by hands-on activities in my home workshop." Elena and Eduardo exchanged glances, their silent communication reflecting years of partnership in parenting decisions. "That sounds like something Sophia would enjoy," Elena responded. "We'd want to attend with her, at least for part of the time." Of course, Blake agreed immediately, understanding their protective concern. "All parents are welcome." Michael has invited several friends from the program. It's actually the first time he's wanted a social gathering centered around his interests, rather than activities he thinks would impress others. This small but significant detail, Michael's growing comfort with his authentic interests rather than social performance, represented exactly the kind of healthy development that aligned with the Martinez family's values for Sophia. The friendship between the children had developed naturally around shared passions rather than through adult arrangement, creating a connection that transcended their different backgrounds. As they discussed the practical details of the birthday celebration, Catherine Montgomery joined the conversation, her medical expertise lending particular weight to her observations about the children's development. The program's emphasis on collaboration rather than competition has been especially valuable, Catherine noted. These children are learning that different perspectives strengthen outcomes rather than threatening individual achievement. This philosophy resonated with Eduardo and Alina, who had worried initially that Sophia might be placed in competitive situations that emphasized her exceptional abilities at the expense of healthy social development. Instead, the program had created a context where her talents became resources for collaborative problem-solving, rather than markers of separation from peers. As the families prepared to leave the Science Center, Dr. Elaine Chen approached with news that would have significant implications for the program's future. The showcase has attracted attention from several major foundations, she informed Reynolds and the Montgomerys. The Keller Foundation is particularly interested in expanding the model to additional communities throughout California. While the adults discussed the potential expansion, Sophia and Michael remained absorbed in conversation about refinements to their hybrid engine design, already planning improvements based on the judges' feedback. Their focus on the work itself, rather than recognition or advancement, reflected exactly the healthy approach to talent development that Eduardo and Alina had hoped to preserve. "They're going to change things," Alina observed quietly to Catherine, watching the children's animated technical discussion, "not just with their abilities, but with how they use them." Catherine nodded agreement. "That's the real achievement here. Not just identifying exceptional talent, but nurturing it in ways that maintain connection to real people and practical problems." As they left the Science Center, the California sunset bathed the building in golden light that seemed to symbolize the illumination that the program had brought to children whose talents might otherwise have remained in shadow. For Sophia Martinez, the journey that had begun with 3 words, variable valve timing, had expanded far beyond that moment of recognition to encompass a community of peers, mentors, and supporters who valued not just her exceptional abilities, but the person she was becoming. Blake Harrington, watching his nephew's animated conversation with Sophia as they walked toward the parking area, reflected on how thoroughly his perspective had changed since that morning at the Concours d'Elegance. What he had intended as momentary cruel entertainment had instead initiated a process of reconsideration that extended far beyond his understanding of Sophia's abilities to encompass his assumptions about talent, opportunity, and the invisible barriers that separated potential from achievement. "Something on your mind?" Victor Montgomery asked, noting Blake's thoughtful expression. Blake nodded, his response more candid than would have been possible months earlier. "I was just thinking about how differently things might have turned out if Sophia had failed that day at the Concours, if she had been what I assumed she must be." Victor considered this counterfactual with serious attention. "The real question isn't about Sophia. Her abilities would have existed, regardless of whether they were recognized. The question is, how many other children with extraordinary potential remain invisible because no one creates the circumstances where their talents can be demonstrated?" This perspective, shifting focus from individual exceptional cases to systemic barriers that prevent talent recognition, represented the most significant evolution in the program's philosophy. What had begun as an effort to support identified prodigies had expanded to address the broader challenge of creating pathways for talent recognition and development across communities, typically excluded from elite educational opportunities. As the Martinez family drove home from the showcase, Sophia's excitement about the judges' feedback and her upcoming collaboration with Michael gradually gave way to the normal tiredness of a 9-year-old after a long day of concentration and social interaction. By the time they reached their modest home, in a working-class neighborhood of Garden Grove, she had fallen asleep in the back seat. The technical brilliance that had impressed Stanford professors temporarily set aside in childhood slumber. Eduardo carried his sleeping daughter inside, reflecting on the journey that had brought them from that moment of confrontation at the Westview Concours to this expanding world of opportunity. What had begun with wealthy men laughing at a little girl's presumption had evolved into something far more significant, not just for Sophia, but for other children whose talents might now find recognition and development through pathways that her experience had helped create. As he gently placed Sophia in her bed, surrounded by the books about engines and mechanical systems that had filled her shelves long before wealthy patrons had entered their lives, Eduardo was struck by how his daughter remained essentially herself despite the extraordinary attention her abilities had attracted. The core qualities that had enabled her to face Blake Harrington's mockery with calm confidence, her genuine curiosity about how things worked, her methodical approach to problem-solving, and her focus on helping rather than impressing, remained intact, now supported rather than challenged by the adults who recognized her potential. In this, Eduardo and Alina had achieved what mattered most to them as parents, creating circumstances where Sophia's exceptional abilities could develop fully while maintaining the grounded perspective and values that would guide how she ultimately used those abilities in the world. The little girl whose 3 words had shocked wealthy Ferrari owners had remained true to herself, even as those words had opened doors that might otherwise have remained firmly closed against her and children like her. 2 years after the Westview Concours d'Elegance, an unusual crowd gathered at Gonzalez Auto Repair in Santa Ana for what Miguel Martinez had jokingly termed an engineering fiesta. The modest auto shop, typically filled with the practical business of mechanical repairs, had been transformed into a showcase for innovative automotive technology designed by participants in the now expanded Reynolds Youth Engineering Program. Sophia, now 11 and noticeably taller, but with the same focused expression she had worn when diagnosing the Ferrari's valve timing problem, stood beside a retrofitted 1967 Chevrolet Impala. The classic car, which had belonged to Miguel's father and had sat non-functional for nearly a decade, now housed a student-designed hybrid conversion system that married vintage American automotive design with cutting-edge environmental technology. The challenge was preserving the driving experience while drastically improving efficiency. Sophia explained to Alessandro Ferraro, the Italian automotive designer who had traveled from Milan specifically to observe the program's achievements. "We didn't want it to feel like a different car, just a better version of itself." Ferraro studied the installation with professional admiration. The hybrid system had been integrated so seamlessly that casual observers wouldn't notice the modification until they realized the Impala's remarkable fuel efficiency and reduced emissions. "This is exactly the thinking we need in the industry," he commented. Honoring automotive heritage while embracing environmental responsibility, Miguel Martinez watched his niece's presentation with undisguised pride. At 47, he had transformed his auto repair business to incorporate the educational dimensions that had grown naturally from Sophia's involvement in the Reynolds program. Gonzalez Auto now served as both a functioning commercial garage and a weekly workshop space where program participants could apply theoretical knowledge to practical automotive challenges. From fixing timing problems to redesigning entire powertrains, Jonathan Reynolds observed, joining Miguel as they watched Sophia field complex technical questions from professional engineers. "Your niece's development has been remarkable." Miguel nodded, though his expression suggested that Sophia's trajectory had not surprised him. as it had others. She always understood mechanical relationships intuitively. What the program has given her is the language and frameworks to express what she already sensed about how systems work. This perspective, recognizing that formal education often provides structure for innate understanding rather than implanting capability where none existed, reflected the philosophical approach that had made the collaboration between Miguel's practical expertise and the program's academic resources so productive for participating students. Across the garage, Michael Harrington, now 14 and showing the first signs of adolescent growth that would eventually match his uncle's height, demonstrated the computational systems that managed the Impala's power distribution. His initial interest in theoretical modeling had expanded to include practical implementation, just as Sophia's hands-on mechanical intuition had grown to encompass more sophisticated engineering principles. The algorithm continuously optimizes between the original V8 engine and the electric drive system, Michael explained to Dr. Elaine Chen and several Caltech engineering students who had become program mentors. It prioritizes the authentic driving experience while minimizing environmental impact. Dr. Chen nodded approval. The balance between performance preservation and efficiency improvement is impressive. You've achieved nearly 90% emission reduction without sacrificing the vehicle's essential character. Blake Harrington observed his nephew's presentation from a discreet distance, his expression reflecting how thoroughly his perspective had evolved since that morning at the Concours. The cruel entertainment he had sought at Sophia's expense had instead initiated a journey of reconsideration that had changed not just his understanding of talent and opportunity, but his approach to his own privileges and responsibilities. Quite different from the Blake Harrington who tried to humiliate a 9-year-old for fixing a Ferrari, Victor Montgomery commented quietly, joining him at his observation point. Blake acknowledged this assessment with a rueful nod. Sometimes I hardly recognize that person myself. The arrogance seems incomprehensible now. Catherine studied him thoughtfully. The capacity to recognize one's mistakes and genuinely change course is rare, particularly among those who've rarely faced consequences for their actions. This simple acknowledgement, not absolution, but recognition of genuine change, reflected the complicated evolution of relationships that had occurred since Sophia's diagnosis had shocked the Westview elite. What had begun as wealthy patronage had gradually transformed into something more balanced, a recognition that privileged access and resources gained value when connected to diverse perspectives and talents that traditional systems often overlooked. Sophia Martinez, who had initially been the most skeptical about wealthy interest in her daughter's abilities, moved through the garage with the quiet confidence of someone whose protective concerns had been largely addressed by the program's development. Her insistence on conditions that respected Sophia's whole personhood, not just her mechanical talents, had helped shape educational approaches that now benefited dozens of children from diverse backgrounds. Your daughter has transformed this program as much as it has supported her development, Victor Montgomery observed, joining Alina as she watched Sophia demonstrate a particularly innovative aspect of the hybrid conversion to a group of automotive industry representatives. Alina nodded, her expression suggesting this outcome had been her intention rather than an unexpected benefit. Sophia's abilities are exceptional, but her values come from our family and community. Making sure those remained central to her education was non-negotiable for us. This perspective, insisting that cultural values and community connections remain integral to talent development rather than being sacrificed for advancement, had become a core principle of the expanded program, which now deliberately built bridges between elite institutions and communities typically excluded from their resources. Dr. Adrian Patel, who had transitioned from interested observer to active program advocate within Stanford's engineering department, approached Alina with news that would have significant implications for the program's future. "We've secured approval for a formal educational partnership," he informed her. "Stanford will provide academic resources and mentorship, while community-based workshops like Miguel's will offer practical application opportunities. The combination creates educational pathways that traditional systems have failed to provide." This institutional commitment, recognizing the value of integrating theoretical knowledge with practical application in communities often distanced from elite education, represented exactly the systemic change that Eduardo and Alina had hoped might emerge from Sophia's individual experience. The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of an unexpected visitor. Robert Chen, CEO of Global Motors, one of the world's largest automotive manufacturers, entered Miguel's garage with the careful attention of someone evaluating potential rather than the dismissive glance that wealthy executives often directed. At modest businesses, Jonathan Reynolds greeted Chen with evident surprise. "Robert, I didn't expect you until the formal showcase next month. What brings you to Miguel's garage today?" Chen gestured toward the retrofitted Impala that had drawn a crowd of industry representatives. "Reports about this hybrid conversion project reached our R&D department. The approach these students have taken to preserving driving experience while drastically improving environmental performance aligns with challenges our engineers have been addressing for years. This corporate interest, focused on innovative solutions rather than merely identifying individual talent, reflected how thoroughly the program's philosophy had evolved from its origins. What had begun as an effort to support exceptional children had expanded to create collaborative approaches to real-world problems that even major corporations found valuable." As Chen joined the group, examining the Impala conversion, Sophia continued. Her explanation of the system's mechanical integration, with the same clear communication and technical precision that had impressed observers since her Ferrari diagnosis. What had changed was not her fundamental abilities, but the context in which they were received, no longer treated as surprising anomalies, but as valuable contributions to shared challenges. "The most innovative aspect is how we've preserved the visceral driving experience while transforming the environmental impact," Sophia explained, pointing out specific components. "The system doesn't just reduce emissions, it actually enhances torque delivery at low RPMs, improving the car's responsiveness in city driving." Chen listened with professional interest, asking technical questions that reflected genuine engagement rather than condescension. "Have you addressed the thermal management challenges that typically affect battery performance in retrofit applications?" Sophia nodded, gesturing toward a component that represented one of her most creative innovations. "We developed a heat exchange system that uses the original engine's cooling infrastructure while adding targeted temperature regulation for the battery modules. Michael's algorithm manages power distribution partially based on thermal conditions. This sophisticated solution, integrating mechanical design with computational management, demonstrated exactly the kind of collaborative problem-solving that the program had been designed to foster." Sophia's mechanical intuition and Michael's programming expertise had combined to create approaches that neither could have developed alone. As the presentations continued and industry representatives engaged with student projects throughout the garage, Eduardo Martinez observed the interactions with the measured satisfaction of a parent whose protective concerns had been addressed without limiting his child's opportunities. The journey that had begun with wealthy men laughing at his daughter's presumption had evolved into something he could never have anticipated. Not just recognition for Sophia, but systematic changes that created pathways for other children whose talents might otherwise have remained hidden behind barriers of assumption and access. Blake Harrington approached Eduardo, their relationship now characterized by cautious mutual respect rather than the social distance that had once seemed unbridgeable. "Your brother has created something remarkable here," Blake observed, gesturing toward the transformed garage where students from diverse backgrounds engaged confidently with industry leaders. "This environment combines the best aspects of practical experience, and academic rigor. Eduardo nodded agreement. Miguel understands that real learning happens when theory meets application. Engines don't care about social status or academic credentials. They respond to genuine understanding, wherever it comes from. This simple truth, that mechanical systems reveal authentic knowledge, regardless of its source, had been at the heart of Sophia's journey from the beginning. What had shocked the Westview elite about her Ferrari? Diagnosis was not just her youth, but her social position. The recognition that exceptional understanding could emerge from contexts they had thoughtlessly dismissed. As the engineering fiesta concluded and participants began packing up their projects, Robert Chen approached Miguel with a proposal that reflected how thoroughly perspectives had shifted since Sophia had first demonstrated her mechanical intuition. "Mr. Martinez, we'd like to explore a formal partnership between Global Motors and your workshop," Chen explained. "This environment you've created, where theoretical knowledge meets practical application in authentic community contexts, produces exactly the kind of innovative thinking our industry needs." Miguel considered the offer with the careful assessment of someone who valued independence and community impact above corporate affiliation. "What kind of partnership do you envision?" "Educational resources, internship opportunities for your students, and most importantly, a pipeline for diverse perspectives into our engineering teams," Chen replied. "The auto industry has remained too homogeneous in its thinking. What I've seen today represents approaches we desperately need." This recognition that diversity of experience and perspective strengthened innovation rather than compromising standards represented exactly the systemic change that the Martinez family had hoped might emerge from Sophia's individual journey. What had begun with 3 words that shocked wealthy Ferrari owners had expanded into structural shifts in how talent was identified, developed, and valued across institutions that had traditionally remained close to children from backgrounds like Sophia's. As the day ended and families departed Miguel's garage, Sophia and Michael remained absorbed in conversation about refinements to their hybrid system, already planning improvements based on the feedback they had received from industry experts. Their focus remained on the work itself rather than recognition or advancement. The genuine engagement with mechanical and computational challenges that had characterized their collaboration from the beginning. 5 years after the Westview Concours, Elegance, a sleek autonomous electric vehicle rolled silently into the central courtyard of the California Institute of Technology. The prototype, developed through an unprecedented collaboration between Global Motors and the Reynolds Innovation Institute, represented a fundamental rethinking of transportation design for environmental sustainability and accessibility. Unlike conventional automotive prototypes, this vehicle had emerged not from corporate R&D departments, but from a unique educational ecosystem that had grown from a single moment of unexpected recognition. Sophia Martinez, now 14, and in her first year of dual enrollment between high school and Caltech's engineering program, conducted final system checks before the official demonstration. Her hands moved with the same methodical precision that had characterized her Ferrari diagnosis years earlier, but now they manipulated advanced diagnostic equipment that monitored the vehicle's integrated systems in real time. Power distribution, optimal, autonomous navigation systems responsive, adaptive efficiency algorithms functioning within expected parameters. She reported to Michael Harrington, now 17, and headed to Stanford in the fall on a full engineering scholarship. Their collaboration had evolved from simple hybrid engine designs to sophisticated integrated systems that merged mechanical engineering, computer science, and environmental technologies. "User interface is fully operational," Michael confirmed, completing his final checks of the vehicle's human interaction systems. "Accessibility features are functioning at 100% compliance with universal design standards." Dr. Elaine Chen observed their pre-demonstration preparations with professional satisfaction. What had begun as a program to identify and nurture exceptional talent had evolved into something far more significant, an educational model that deliberately integrated diverse perspectives and experiences to address complex technological challenges. The autonomous vehicle project exemplified this approach. Designed from the beginning with considerations that traditional automotive development often treated as afterthoughts, they've internalized the integration of technical excellence with human-centered design. Dr. Chen commented to Jonathan Reynolds as they watched the final preparations. That's something most engineers don't fully grasp until well into their professional careers, if ever. Reynolds nodded agreement. The institute that now bore his name had expanded far beyond its original concept, developing educational methodologies that major universities and corporations were now adopting as models for their own talent development programs. The technical achievements are impressive, but it's their approach to problem solving that represents the real innovation. Eduardo and Elena Martinez arrived for the demonstration with the quiet pride of parents who had successfully navigated the challenges of raising a child with extraordinary abilities without sacrificing family values or community connections. Now in their late 50s, they had become respected advocates for educational approaches that created genuine opportunity without requiring children to abandon their cultural roots or family relationships. Mama, Papa, Sophia greeted them, briefly stepping away from her technical preparations to embrace her parents. Despite her accelerated academic path and growing professional recognition, she remained fundamentally grounded in the family relationships and values that had shaped her development long before wealthy patrons had recognized her abilities. Alina studied her daughter with a mother's perceptive eye, looking beyond the technical accomplishments to assess her overall well-being. "You looked tired, Mia. Have you been sleeping enough with all the preparation for today?" This simple question, prioritizing Sophia's health and balance above her achievements, reflected the perspective that had guided the Martinez family's decisions throughout Sophia's educational journey. Their insistence that her development as a whole person remain paramount had helped shape program approaches that now benefited hundreds of students across California. "I'm fine, Mama," Sophia assured her mother with the patient affection of an adolescent who understood parental concern. "Uncle Miguel made sure we took breaks and kept reasonable hours, even with the demonstration deadline." Miguel Martinez had indeed become an essential counterbalance to academic pressures, maintaining the practical hands-on dimensions of Sophia's education even as she progressed through increasingly advanced theoretical coursework. His auto shop, now expanded into the Martinez Technical Workshop, served as a vital bridge between academic institutions and community-based learning, hosting weekend programs where university engineering students worked alongside neighborhood teenagers on practical projects. As invited guests arrived for the demonstration, Blake Harrington approached with Robert Chen, CEO of Global Motors, and Alessandro Ferraro, whose automotive design firm had contributed to the prototype's distinctive aesthetic. The men's conversation reflected how thoroughly perspectives had shifted since that morning at the Westview Concours d'Elegance. The integration of accessibility features from the earliest design stages, rather than as adaptations, represents a fundamental shift in approach, Chen was explaining. Traditional development starts with standard users and modifies for different needs. This team began by considering the full spectrum of potential users and designed universal systems from the ground up. Blake nodded, his understanding of inclusive design having evolved significantly through his involvement with the Institute's programs. Michael explained that considering diverse user needs from the beginning actually improved the vehicle's overall functionality and user experience for everyone, not just those with specific requirements. This recognition, that inclusive design strengthened products rather than compromising them, represented one of the most significant philosophical shifts that had emerged from the educational ecosystem surrounding Sophia's journey. What had begun with wealthy men laughing at a presumptuous child had evolved into approaches that deliberately sought out perspectives traditionally excluded from elite engineering environments. Victor and Catherine Montgomery joined the gathering, their involvement having expanded from initial patronage to active participation in program development. Catherine's medical expertise had proven particularly valuable in helping engineering students understand human factors in technology design, while Victor's corporate connections had created pathways for implementing innovations in real-world applications. The psychological impact of autonomous vehicle interaction has been largely overlooked in commercial development. Catherine was explaining to a group of Caltech faculty members. This team's approach to creating systems that generate trust and comfort for users represents a significant advancement in human-machine interface design. As the formal demonstration began, Dr. Adrian Patel introduced the project to assembled guests from academia, industry, and community organizations that had contributed to the collaborative development process. His remarks emphasized not just the technical achievements, but the educational methodology that had produced them. This prototype represents more than advanced transportation technology, Dr. Patel explained. It demonstrates the extraordinary outcomes possible when we deliberately integrate diverse perspectives, experiences, and knowledge systems in engineering education. The team that developed this vehicle includes students from backgrounds, typically underrepresented in elite technical education, working in true collaboration with traditional engineering students. Sophia and Michael conducted the demonstration with professional confidence, explaining the vehicle's innovative features while acknowledging the contributions of team members who had addressed specific aspects of the design. Unlike conventional presentations that often centered on individual achievement, their approach emphasized collective problem-solving and the integration of different perspectives. The navigation system incorporates knowledge from team members who use wheelchairs to create algorithms that prioritize truly accessible routes, not just technically possible ones, Michael explained, highlighting how lived experience had informed technical specifications. Sophia continued. The power management system was developed through collaboration between theoretical physicists and practical mechanics from community repair shops, combining advanced efficiency modeling with performance optimization. This deliberate integration of diverse knowledge systems, valuing practical expertise alongside academic theory, lived experience alongside technical specification, represented the educational philosophy that had emerged from Sophia's journey. What had begun with the recognition of a single child's exceptional abilities had evolved into approaches that deliberately sought out and valued multiple forms of knowledge and perspective. Robert Chen observed the demonstration with growing interest, particularly noting how the vehicle's design addressed issues that conventional automotive development often overlooked. As the formal presentation concluded and guests examined the prototype more closely, he approached Eduardo and Elena Martinez with a proposal that reflected how thoroughly industry perspectives had shifted. Mr. and Mrs. Martinez, Global Motors, is establishing an innovation center focused on transportation accessibility and environmental sustainability, Chen explained. We'd like to locate it in Santa Ana, adjacent to your brother's workshop, to maintain the community connections that have proven so valuable to the development process. This proposal, bringing corporate resources to the community rather than extracting talent from it, represented exactly the kind of structural change that the Martinez family had hoped might emerge from Sophia's individual journey. What had begun with wealthy men mocking a child's presumption had evolved into recognition that communities typically marginalized in technological development actually offered vital perspectives that strengthened innovation. As the demonstration event transitioned to informal conversations among participants, Blake Harrington found himself reflecting on the transformation that had occurred since that morning at the Concours. His attempt to humiliate Sophia had instead initiated a process of reconsideration that extended far beyond his understanding of her specific abilities to encompass fundamental assumptions about talent, knowledge, and the barriers that separated potential from opportunity. "It's remarkable to consider how differently things might have unfolded," Catherine Montgomery observed, joining Blake at his observation point. "If Sophia had failed that day with the Ferrari, if she had been what you expected her to be, none of this would exist." Blake nodded, accepting this assessment without defensiveness. The educational ecosystem, the corporate partnerships, the hundreds of students who found pathways previously closed to them, all from a moment I intended as cruel entertainment. It's humbling to recognize how thoroughly wrong I was, not just about Sophia, but about where valuable knowledge and perspective can emerge. This recognition that his assumptions about worth and capability had fundamentally missed the mark represented genuine growth rather than merely a changed position. What had begun as embarrassment at being proven wrong had evolved into substantive reconsideration of perspectives that had limited his understanding of human potential and contribution. As the event concluded and participants dispersed, Sophia joined her parents and uncle for a family dinner that maintained their grounding rituals. Despite the accelerating pace of her academic and professional development, these consistent connections to family, to community, to the practical work of Miguel's shop had provided essential balance throughout her journey, preventing her exceptional abilities from becoming separated from the values and relationships that gave them meaning and direction. "The prototype is impressive," Miguel commented as they shared a meal at the family's favorite local restaurant. "But I'm more impressed by how you and Michael insisted on crediting everyone who contributed to its development. That kind of generosity is more valuable than any technical innovation." This perspective, prioritizing character and values above achievement, had been consistent throughout Sophia's development. From her earliest work in Miguel's shop, through her accelerating academic advancement. What had made her diagnosis of the Ferrari remarkable was not just her technical understanding, but her approach to problem solving, focused on helping rather than showcasing her abilities, on solving real problems rather than performing for approval. As they enjoyed their family dinner, discussing everyday matters alongside Sophia's technical work, the journey that had begun with 3 words, variable valve timing, continued to expand in ways that transformed not just individual lives but institutional approaches to talent, knowledge, and opportunity. What wealthy men had dismissed with laughter had evolved into innovations that changed how capability was recognized, developed, and valued across systems that had traditionally remained closed to children like Sophia Martinez. The evening sun cast long shadows across the California Institute of Technology campus as Sophia Martinez made final adjustments to the autonomous vehicle that represented not just technological innovation, but a fundamental shift in who could participate in creating tomorrow's solutions. The journey that had begun with 3 words, variable valve timing, had transformed not just her life, but hundreds of others. "Ready for tomorrow's global live stream?" Michael asked, closing his laptop after submitting their final documentation. Sophia nodded, her eyes reflecting both confidence and humility. "It's strange to think this all started because someone thought I couldn't fix a car." From across the courtyard, Alina and Eduardo watched their daughter with quiet pride. They had protected her childhood while nurturing her extraordinary gifts, a balance that now informed educational programs worldwide. Those rich men never imagined their Ferrari would change education forever, Miguel commented, joining his brother. Blake Harrington approached, his expression thoughtful. "I came to mock a child, and instead witnessed the beginning of a revolution in how we recognize talent." As cameras were positioned for the next day's international broadcast, Robert Chen reviewed the press materials with Jonathan Reynolds. From a garage in Santa Ana to MIT, Stanford, and beyond all, because we finally started looking for brilliance in places we'd been trained to ignore. The autonomous vehicle stood as testament not just to Sophia's mechanical genius, but to what becomes possible when barriers fall and opportunity expands. A Ferrari's broken engine had revealed not just one child's exceptional abilities, but exposed the flawed systems that kept countless others from reaching their potential. Has someone underestimated you or your child? Have you witnessed talent dismissed because it came from unexpected sources? Share your story in the comments below. Tomorrow's episode reveals how a forgotten musician in New Orleans transformed a world-famous orchestra. Subscribe now so you don't miss these stories of extraordinary talent in unexpected places where 3 words can change everything.